November is officially coming to an end, and that means Nsliy semi-finalist season is finally upon us. Whether you have received your semi-finalist email or are a hopeful applicant awaiting your semi-finalist status, you've come to the right place for help navigating arguably the most critical and the most stressful part of the Nsliy application process, the interview. Now, before we discuss interview details, there are also some other procedures Nsliy semi-finalists must go through in order to be considered eligible for finalist consideration. I'm going to briefly go through them here. First off is the medical evaluation form. This should be included in the semi-finalist email and consists of 4 parts. One is for you and your parents to fill out, another one is for your doctor to fill out. If you are applying for AY, there's another one for your dentist to fill out, and if you're currently consulting a mental health professional, there's also one for them as well. However, if these last 2 don't apply to you, then you just complete the first 2. Your part of the form will include questions on any allergies you have, if you're taking any prescriptions, if you wear braces, etc. It's important to note that the information you will provide in the medical evaluation form will not be used during the selection process. Nsliy does a really good job of accommodating for various health and dietary restrictions, and so this is their way of obtaining data to do so. Next is placement information. This information should be uploaded into your semi-finalist portal, which will open about 1 to 2 weeks after you receive your semi-finalist email. The form asks about physical or learning accommodations, diet, religion, and very basic medical information. It also asks for a passport-sized photo, as well as 1 to 2 personal photos that just show off your personality. Again, this information is not used during the selection process, but is just their way of determining host location and host family placement. Next is your US passport. If you do not have a passport already, I urge you to apply for a passport as soon as possible. That is ASAP. Your passport is a non-negotiable part of the study abroad experience, and so just applying for one early saves you so much hassle. If you already have your passport, it must be valid up to 6 months after the anticipated end date of your program. When I applied last year, that cutoff was late February 2023. My passport at the time was valid up until early February 2023, but I was still told to renew my passport. So if your expiration date is a bit on the fence, I would recommend just renewing it. Finalists must submit a copy of their passport within 1 week of their finalist selection, and for my year that was around late March. So now the interview. An organization called AFS conducts Nsliy interviews, and these could happen either through the phone, virtually through Zoom, or face-to-face. The interviews usually happen from late December all throughout January and early Feb. Mine was actually pretty late during the process, around mid-February, but that was likely because of the chaos that COVID created last year. While there isn't a way to know every single question your interviewer is going to ask, there's definitely a few that you should have a response for coming into the interview. Not necessarily memorizing a response, but having a broad outline of what you're going to say is super important. Number 1 is introduce yourself. For this, I would just start off with the basics: your name, where you're coming from, and maybe include some hobbies, anything from languages to policy to sports to STEM, anything you want that just gives you a little bit more personality. It might also be a good idea to include something about current goals. That is, what are you committed to doing right now? Don't feel obligated to make this answer strictly about Nsliy. Make it about you. Add some personality. Because there definitely will be other Nsliy specific questions later on. Second is why Nsliy. This should be a little bit of an easier answer because you've already written about this in your essay. Think about some of the general benefits of Nsliy, its mission of supporting the future generation of international leaders, of immersion, of how, going abroad would help or align with your professional goals. You should also touch upon how Nsliy would offer an insight like no other. There are plenty of other study abroad opportunities out there, but why Nsliy? Really think about where you're coming from and how Nsliy can push you to become a better, more internationally aware version of yourself. Third is, why this language? Again, this was another essay question, so feel free to elaborate on anything that you said in your essay. The great thing about this also being an interview question is that you're no longer bound by the 3-reason prompt that they gave you for the initial essays. For me, I talked about how a specific incident that sparked my interest in Korean unfolded, and then tied that into my professional interests and how Korean would play a role in that. I feel like an anecdote would be really powerful for this type of question because it allows you to explain not only what happened or what led to your interest, but then describe the impact of it as well and make it make sense. So really think about a specific moment. You can also touch upon some things you've done to gain proficiency in the language if that applies to you. Apart from these 3 fundamental questions, they could also ask, besides language and culture, what's something you want to learn from the Nsliy experience? How will Nsliy help your long-term goals? Describe your ideal host family. What are you specifically looking forward to doing in blank host country? Elaborate on your most impactful extracurricular activity. So what they're looking for in these questions is obviously originality, but then also just, it's not enough to state something. You want to be able to back up everything that you're saying with an anecdote or just explaining the impact of something you've done or something you've seen. Because I'm adaptable. Okay, how have you demonstrated that you're adaptable before? What kind of obstacles have you overcome, and how has that resilience impacted you as a person now? So really think about the how and the why for every claim that you're making, I guess. And remember that they really want to hear those anecdotes. The interview also features some situational questions, and they're basically trying to gauge what your response would be in various unfamiliar situations, because you're going to encounter so many of those when you're abroad. The program really throws you into a foreign environment, and they need mature, resilient individuals that can not only adapt but also thrive in such an environment. And so to determine this, they will ask questions like, what was an awkward or unusual situation you faced, and what did you learn from it? Has there been a time in the past when you were not allowed to participate in an extracurricular for any reason? Has there been a time when you had an argument with an authority figure? Describe a time when you wanted to do something with your friends but your parents didn't let you. What if your host family says you can't do blank? That is, if you have different rules compared to the rest of your cohort, how do you react? When you're abroad, your situation and your lifestyle is going to be very different to how you live in the US. And so they just want to see, if living with the host family, trying new foods, using public transportation, a foreign public transportation system, may I add, regularly, just being able to deal with all of this new information and new experiences with a positive, controlled attitude is really important. In the interview, if you can eloquently demonstrate how your past experiences prove that you are a capable person who has a strong passion for your intended language and whose goals align with the Nsliy mission, then you've already established yourself as a strong candidate. All this being said, remember to breathe and not over-prepare. The interviewers, many of them are alumni themselves. They understand any nervousness you may have. They really just want to see your most authentic self. I know that sounds cliche. Just make sure to highlight your strengths and elaborate on anything that you say, really. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments below, and I hope you enjoy next week's vlog. Bye!